All right, I think I see Jenny there too.
Yes.
All right, so I will also mute my mic unless I need to stop you for whatever reason. We have a few other people joining us. Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and start. It's 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get going. We have people joining us now. We're also on the Facebook group, so this is being held live on the Facebook group as well, if you guys are in the group. But we're going to answer the questions from the people who registered first. Those are priority. And then if we have time, we'll go to the group. And if there's any questions in the group, we'll ask those. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is Rhonda from Whole Plant Access for Autism. We have Ray here from Canniatric and CW Hemp. He's a distributor here in California. He's a good friend of ours. We've presented various locations and different events together, and he's always had a great presentation. So we wanted to host him and have him present for our families because he knows more, honestly, about epilepsy than me and even Jenny and some of the other people that work with us. And, you know, he's, for as far as I'm concerned, more knowledgeable about epilepsy and cannabis than a lot of people that I know. So for questions, if you have them, go ahead and ask them during the talk, and Ray would like me to go ahead and just, as questions come up, I'll ask them if I see them. And then towards the end, if we can have more questions and answers, that's totally fine. And I guess we're ready to go. So Ray, I turn over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining this webinar. Can everybody hear me right? Rhonda, is my voice coming through clear?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you turn it up a little bit on your side, or is it that on my side?
No, I'll bring this a little bit closer to me, maybe here. Is it better now?
There you go. Yeah,
right.
There you go.
Very good. So I am going to spend some time just talk about some of my experiences throughout the last almost a decade of treating epilepsy and seizures with cannabinoids. So we'll go through some slides, and I want to make it a little bit interactive. So I want you guys to stop me and ask questions as I'm talking about things. Use this time to just sort of pick my brain. I've helped over 14,000 people in the last 8 years and counting. That's the people that we have documented in our office of, who emailed us, texted us, came here for consultations and so on. And so we have a good amount of observational data collected on almost everybody that we've helped in terms of what has worked more than others and what has been reported to be better than others, and primarily cannabinoid speaking. So I'm going to go through these slides. Initially, I'm going to talk a little bit about history and how I got involved and my daughter Emily's story. Just in case if any of you are not familiar with who I am and how I got involved in the cannabinoids scene. So let's go on to the next slide, which is just a table of contents. I think we have posted this all over our Facebook group, so you guys should have seen this before. This is my daughter Emily. Emily started having seizures at 5 months old. It was day after her vaccinations. Unfortunately, she was one of those cases that got affected. Her first seizure was about 45 minutes long. It was a grand mal seizure, landed her in a children's hospital in Los Angeles, and a whole 10 days of workup and everything came back negative. And EEGs and MRIs and spinal taps and every test that they've done came back negative. And so we came home, and she didn't have a seizure for another 4 or 5 months, I think. And then she had a small seizure again in that time. I think it was December. And a couple of months after that, we took her in, and she got her second set of vaccines. And almost immediately afterwards, about a few days afterwards, I think 4 or 5 days afterwards, she had an hour and 15-minute seizure, which was not responding to any rescue medications or Ativan. So they had to induce coma. And so they put her into a medically induced coma for almost 2 weeks. And again, a bunch of work was done at the PICU. Everything again sort of came back negative. She did come home this time with a generalized epilepsy diagnosis. Ever since that time, she has had 24,000 plus seizures. She is 15 years old right now. And we've tried almost everything Western medicine has to offer. This is Emily, I'd say probably about 4 or 5 years ago, having one of her seizures. Her seizure types are tonic-clonic grand mal seizures that generally start and go on for about a minute, and then they stop, and then they start again. So it's tonic, 1 minute or so, stops, goes into a clonic seizure. And if you watch this video in its entirety, which is about 2 minutes, you'll see that it goes through these phases that she's going through. And at some point in her life, she was having a good 100, 120 seizures a day, every day of her life. And she was on heavy doses of multiple anti-epilepsy medications. And then at best, I think with the medications, we were somewhere around 45 seizures a month, so 1 or 2 a day. Most of her seizures have always been grand mal tonic-clonic seizures, but she has experienced multiple other types of seizures as well. She's had myoclonic jerks and the staring and absence seizures, and she's gone through the entire phase of all these different types of seizures throughout the last 15 years. But now, generally, this is the type of her seizures that she is having. When she was about 6, 7 years old, or somewhere around there, she did get diagnosed with Dravet syndrome. And so there it is. She's now going into what the second phase of her seizure is, which is the clonic. So this also lasts about a minute. So here we are, and let's go back to about 2011, 12, 13. We were at our 8th neurologist at this point, just getting the same answer, hopeless, no answers basically. And the 8th neurologist was telling me and my wife to prepare ourselves for the worst and go into looking for hospice care. And the conversations were almost every time, the doctor telling us, you guys should be thinking about a second child. I mean, we weren't really talking about Emily at these doctor's appointments anymore, because she had failed 15 medications, ketogenic diet for a good almost 2 years, stem cells a couple of times outside of the country. I mean, every other treatment you could imagine, you name it. You guys who are affected by epilepsy are familiar, biofeedback, neurofeedback, we've done it all. And so here comes around the same time a documentary, or a couple of documentaries about cannabis and epilepsy. And these kids, one in California, Jason David's kid, and then one in Colorado, Charlotte. And these 2 documentaries that were aired pretty close to each other sort of sparked hope. And we were clueless. I was a college professor teaching opticianry, and I had a very strict anti-cannabis policy at the time for my own students. And then this documentary is coming, and I start looking into it, and we were hopeless parents. And so we found out real quickly that CBD in 2012-13 didn't really exist in California. It was a struggle to get it. I can tell you, between me and a couple of other California parents, we probably walked into every cannabis dispensary, medical cannabis dispensary at the time in California. I mean, we're talking about even Northern California, anything from San Diego to Oakland and San Francisco, and whatever we could find. And most of the time we would come back empty-handed. And sometimes we would come back with a tincture bottle that had absolutely no label, and there was a masking tape on it and a Sharpie that said CBD oil. That's it. There was no label. And we would give it to our kids, desperately trying to mimic what we saw on CNN or on Discovery Channel. And for the most part, it failed, unfortunately. It wasn't until after the WID documentary by Dr. Sanjay Gupta that I reached out to the Stanley brothers through social media. I sent them a Facebook message, which was very long. It was our entire life story and Emily's history, because there was extreme similarities to Emily's case and Charlotte's case. And I just, sent a very desperate letter to Joel Stanley, who, to my surprise, responded the next day. And I found myself in Colorado just a few days after that, learned a lot about what this process is, what this product is, the legalities at the time. This was a cannabis strain, and we couldn't transport it. I I went back and forth about 8 times until I was able to smuggle some real CBD back to California in 2013, and I was able to give it to Emily, and we saw immediate reaction. I can tell you, almost immediate 50% reduction in seizures. It was very hard to get. The struggle was definitely there. I got pulled over in the borders of California and Arizona by agricultural agents. Almost got arrested trying to bring in CBD oil from Colorado. And so all of this led to me sort of trying to help these companies and launch in California, and so instead of relocating to Colorado, becoming one of these cannabis refugees that everybody else was doing at the time, try to provide it here to Emily and to everybody else. So a lot of things happened. We finally were able to help these companies launch in California and get this oil for my daughter. I can tell you, Emily came a long way ever since starting CBD. A couple of years into starting CBD, she became medication free. And I'm going to go to the next slide. This is post CBD. At the time we started CBD, Emily was on 4 medications, and those medications were Keppra, clonazepam, Topamax, Depakote, all at the same time. So again, if the epilepsy community, the parents, you guys know what that means. I mean, we had absolutely zero quality of life. And at the same time that we were on these medications, or playing around with the cocktail of these medications, I should say, we had 40 seizures, 45 seizures per month. And so with CBD reducing the seizures over 50 to 70%, we were able to win her off of some of these meds. Eventually, she became medication free. And once that happened, the quality of life improved by 100%. Not only hers, but our entire families. And it was the victory was there. The victory was absolutely regaining quality of life, because she was still having seizures. She wasn't seizure free. She just was having about 50 to 75% less seizures now. But most importantly, she was not on any medications, and she just became alive again. She started smiling, she started feeling, she started crying for the first time. I remember the first time we saw Emily really cry her eyes out. Me and my wife were crying from happiness, because she was feeling an emotion, and she was emotional, and she was crying, and we had never seen that. And so these are the things that happened when we started coming off of these medications. And I think through the years, I've definitely focused on the term quality of life matters, because when somebody comes to the alternative side of trying cannabinoids and cannabis for epilepsy or autism or whatever it is that they're trying it for, I think the focus and the purpose is to regain quality of life, not necessarily to cure the symptoms or the disease, not to become seizure free. It's very rare that we have seizure free with cannabis oils. I've had several cases, but the percentage is very low. But the majority of cases have been able to regain quality of life by a significant percentage. And so this is a quality of life program, is what we say. And so that's Emily's story, and how I got involved. Through the experience, I was able to help the Realm of Caring Foundation launch a chapter in California in 2013 with the help of Heather Jackson, and we helped a lot of families in California during that time. I think most of you are probably aware, or you heard, that Charlotte's Web had a waiting list, and that waiting list became 15,000 people in a very short period of time. And so, we worked very hard to get rid of that waiting list very quickly, and we worked hard to make this product or products available to people, not only in California, but everywhere. It took a lot of lobbying, changing in policy. It took lots of risk and investment and hard work by many, many parents and people. Most of them are parents like myself who really, contributed and dedicated their lives to making these changes. So how does this work? How did it, first of all, I want to stop. I'm going fast. Any questions so far or not, Rhonda?
I don't see any so far. At least none of the people that registered, I don't see on the Facebook group. So keep on going. I'll stop you if I see something.
Very good. Okay. So how did this work, and how, what is the endocannabinoid system? What happens when a child like my daughter who has epilepsy takes CBD or THC or any cannabinoids? And so, I don't want to get too much into the science of it. I know that this information is widely available now in, Google or internet search, and I know Dr. Bonnie Goldstein and other doctors have done presentations. But just to sort of do a quick recap, the endocannabinoid system, as we know it right now, is a set of receptors. We call them CB1 and CB2 receptors. These receptors sort of activate when cannabinoids are consumed, and the effect of it is a neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory effect. So basically what we're saying is neuroprotection, which is the rebuilding of the nervous system or the nervous system function, is what happens when you're consuming cannabinoids like CBD or THC. And anti-inflammatory basically means it reduces your inflammation, specifically on the nervous system or nervous system related. So what term is usually used when we talk about the endocannabinoid system is homeostasis. That is definitely what happens. It creates harmony. It creates, it sort of regulates the transmitting of the information between the cells and creates a balance. And that is extremely important. That is the reason why it helps so many different symptoms. It's not just for epilepsy or autism. There are many people taking CBD or cannabinoids for many different reasons now and reporting success and coming off of their opiates or pain medications or anxiety medications. It is somewhat of a new discovery, and there is a lot more to be discovered. I think there's a good amount of research, especially outside of United States, being done to find even more receptors. The belief is that there are more receptors that are there, and I think the future of cannabinoid therapy is bright, and there's a lot of unknowns right now, but in the near future, hopefully we'll get a good amount of answers and how-tos and what to in terms of symptom-specific treatments. For the moment, there is no claims that can be made by manufacturers or companies. In other words, nobody can come out and say CBD cures this or that. In fact, you cannot even say it treats or it helps. The wording and verbiage around CBD products and companies and what they can say is pretty strictly enforced by FDA. So companies such as Charlotte's Web have to be very, very careful of what they are saying or claiming on their social media postings, on their labels, and their websites. Some of the companies are compliant or stay compliant, some aren't. We'll talk about that in the slides coming up. But here's the endocannabinoid system receptors. The simplest way to understand this is right now we know of two receptors, CB1, CB2. CB1 is primarily on the nervous system in the brain. CB2 is on the peripheral organs, and full spectrum whole plant products activate all of these receptors or both of them, producing results all around the body. And we'll talk about full spectrum and what that means in comparison to other forms. But when you take CBD, for just to make sense of this, at the slide that you're looking at right now, when you take CBD, you're activating primarily the nervous system and CB1 receptors that are in the brain. The neuroactivity is regulated. This is where children who have had an abnormal EEG after taking CBD for a while will go back to their neurologist and do an EEG, and the EEG will be normalized and there will be no seizure activity. That has happened to my daughter and many other kids that I've helped so far. And so, the point is that we want to keep these receptors activated. We want to create that homeostasis It is a long-term treatment. You know, you can't take it one time and expect a result in 2 hours. Uh, and so here's the endocannabinoid system. How it helps epilepsy, we talked about it. I stole a little bit of information from my favorite doctor in the world, Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. I'm going to share it with you here. Uh, so endocannabinoid system balances cells regulating the neurotransmitters. We said that. Dr. Goldstein says in many ways it works very similarly to anti-epilepsy medications. And she has given an excellent example of this in some of the research that she's published for the Realm of Caring Foundation and some that is in her published book. And if you look at the right side of this slide, you will see that she compares how, oops, sorry, I passed that slide, sorry. She compares how these cannabinoids compared to felbamate or compared to Depakote or Omfi. And so reading this first bullet point, CBD blocks NMDA receptors, which are involved in excitation. Felbamate's mechanism of action is exactly that. So it works very similarly to that. CBD binds to GABA receptors, enhancing the inhibition of excitation. So does felbamate, as we just said, but that's also the mechanism of action for Depakote, Tegretol, Omfi, and phenobarbital, and so on. So this slide, and Rhonda will make these slides available to everybody or anybody that wants it. You know, it goes on to compare cannabinoids and CBD specifically to anti-epilepsy medications in terms of how they work in the body. And so this sort of, to me, makes sense as to why children with epilepsy or patients with epilepsy respond to CBD, and what happens when you take it. I hope that makes sense to you guys.
Hey, Ray, we have a question from somebody. I'll go ahead and ask if you want to address it now. Or you can also wait if you could address it later.
No, go ahead, please.
So this person is asking, can you discuss less popular cannabinoids like CBN, THCA? And then they're also asking if when you consume THCA, does it metabolize into THC in your body? And are there benefits for seizures for either of those cannabinoids or some of these lesser cannabinoids?
All of that is coming up in the upcoming slides. We'll discuss.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss them in a little bit. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself. That was the only question. Go ahead, Ray. Thank you.
No worries.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, I think I was muted. So
sorry, that might have been me. My bad.
That's okay. It's okay. So we'll discuss all of that information in the coming slides. I'm going to just go on, and as I get to the other cannabinoids, please stop me and ask me any questions if I don't cover it. Moving on, let's see. So which cannabinoids for what epilepsy? And so what type of seizures respond to what kind of cannabinoid? So I get asked all the time through my consultations and informational sessions that I offer here, you know, what type of seizures are CBD or cannabinoids good for? In other words, you know, if somebody has tonic-clonic seizures versus absence seizures, is there a specific cannabinoid that is better for that? You know, the real answer to that is we really don't know. There is such a lack of research on you know, specific cannabinoids for specific types of seizures. Nobody has really looked into that. I can tell you from my experience, generally starting with one of these cannabinoids, for example, CBD is the most reported cannabinoid that has helped with seizures. So to create a general trial and error rule for yourself and say, okay, we're going to start with one and trial and error and document, and then move on to the other ones. And eventually we're going to document and journal what has worked better. And then maybe we can create cocktail. Now, what I just told you is exactly what happens when you go to your neurologist and they prescribe one anti-epilepsy medication versus the other one, and eventually you come back and mix and match some of them and do cocktails. So it's the same approach here, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is, believe me, I've had clients who've responded excellent with, let's say, THCA for grand mal seizures, And I've had clients that THCA didn't do anything for their grand mal seizures. And I can say that about almost all of the cannabinoids. But generally, majority of this epilepsy population has used CBD much more than the other cannabinoids because of availability for the most part. And so the most data that's available is on CBD. So automatically the go-to for everybody that's treating epilepsy or consulting or coaching with cannabinoids is the CBD first. And then you add the other cannabinoids as you go on. So that would be my answer. The dosing is very different. We have enough data to sort of figure out or standardize what the dosing protocol should be for each of these cannabinoids. And then the rest of it is based on availability, especially if you're living in non-cannabis legal states. But if you're in a non-cannabis legal state, CBD probably is your best bet. The other, as I said, the other side of this is availabilities. For example, there is a good amount of research or peer-reviewed articles or opinions by professionals that claim THCV could be the answer to epilepsy or seizure cannabinoid therapies. Well, it's not really that widely available. It is coming on. It's just like CBG wasn't available until just a year or two ago. THCV is something that a lot of these farmers and manufacturing labs are working on isolating and creating products of. And I think very soon we will have all of these isolated options that we can try either individually or add on to the CBD or THC or whatever it is that we're using to create the unique profile that our patient needs. And so it's very customized, it's very individualized. And that's my answer to which cannabinoid for what epilepsy.
Ray, quick question.
Go ahead.
Someone's asking about CBD and would it be helpful if their child has a neurological disorder like Rett syndrome?
Excellent. So the easy and quick answer is yes, but in a sense that you really wouldn't know until you try. And I say that because I've helped several people who had Rett syndrome. In fact, we've participated in some Rett syndrome events locally where we set up, booths and talked to parents. And, some of these parents came in and they tried cannabinoids such as CBD, and we've had significant improvements and results. Now, I'm not saying it's the cure-all, or I'm not saying that it's gonna, be magical. In many cases, it might not be, but it will produce some kind of a positive result in a sense that the parent will see improvements in some areas of the symptoms that they're dealing with. Now, go back to my daughter's slides and what I was talking about. Sometimes what you want out of this treatment is to regain quality of life for your child. And if that is what happens when you try CBD or THC or any of these cannabinoids, then you should consider that a victory. And I think, for a natural herbal supplement to do that, it's great. But yes, I've helped several clients with Rett syndrome. It's been a mixed experience. We've had some that have had significant improvements. So if you want to know what that specific protocol was, even though it really doesn't matter because it's so unique and individualized, I can share that with you after this session. I have to dig into my observational data that I have on these clients and see what combination finally really worked. Generally, I'll tell you this. If you were to call me for a coaching or consulting for a Rett syndrome or any of these, I would start you with CBD only, full spectrum CBD, go on 8 weeks of trial and error of different doses and different products, meaning different strains. And then if that didn't produce any results, then we would switch off to other cannabinoids, or we would add other cannabinoids to it.
Thank you, Ray. They have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Same person was asking for weaning medications. Is there a certain protocol? In our group, I know we just tell people to talk to their doctors because we're not comfortable with doing, advice with weaning. But do you guys have a weaning protocol that you guys use?
So that is also a slide coming up that I want to talk about. But
okay.
Just to quickly touch on that. it's a very, very risky task, you know, especially if your child has been on any type of let's say benzodiazepine or opiate type of medication. You know, these medications or these substances are extremely dependency building and addictive. You have to treat this exactly like you would treat somebody who's an alcoholic or hooked on any of the, you know, coke or heroin or any of these drugs. I mean, it's really the same. And believe me, I don't want to sound harsh. I've taken my daughter off of 15 medications. Me and my wife did it ourselves. No doctor helped us, but we did it, and it was a terribly tough task. And we dealt with many, many months of withdrawal symptoms. So if you're going to go that route of weaning medications, first uh, thing to do is to talk to your doctor, the doctor that prescribed these meds. Unfortunately, in many cases, these doctors are not going to support you in coming off of all of your meds. What their protocol is, they'll replace or they'll add a med before they take another one off. If you find that you're on your own and wanting to do this, do a lot of research, talk to adult patients who have come off of these medications. There are support groups on social media for those people. But most importantly, keep in mind that your child or your adult patient, whoever it is you're caring for, is extremely dependent and hooked on this stuff, especially if they've been on it for over 6 months, let's say. So you would have to come off very, very slowly. Just to make an example of this, let's say one of the meds that I was giving my daughter was clonazepam, and it was the 0.25 milligram. It's a very small, tiny yellow cap, the pill. If we would cut this small pill, I mean, it was almost impossible to do, but we would cut this in almost 6 pieces. When I say almost, that means you would waste half of the pill usually. And we would take off 1/6 of it once a month. That's how sensitive she was to it. She was so hooked on it. And even at that rate, she would have a lot of withdrawals, and those withdrawals would be seizures. Most of them would be panic and anxiety, insomnia. So it's not an easy thing to go through. You definitely need to prepare yourself for it if you're going to go that route, especially if there's multiple medications. At a slide coming up somewhere down the line, I do talk about what helps in terms of cannabinoids. So, you know, we used a lot of THC when we were taking off our daughter off of these medications, and it definitely helps. So we'll talk about that coming soon.
Another question, would you start with CBD and then continue adding, for example, other cannabinoids like THCA, CBG on top of that, or try one, stop it, and then try another? What do you think?
Great question. So that is, I would say almost 100% of the time, that's my protocol. Now, that means you start with CBD if you are talking to me, always, for multiple reasons. One, it's non-psychoactive for the most part. Your child can take it and go to school and, you know, function and all that stuff. Two, full spectrum CBD also has THC in there. So we're not just giving this child or this patient CBD only. We're not giving an isolated CBD. There is some THC in there. So if it's going to benefit them, that small percentage might also benefit them. Three, not everybody has access to THC oils. It's not something I can mail to you. You have to be in a legal state. You have to go to a dispensary and buy it. It's much more expensive. And four, you need a doctor's recommendation letter for it, unlike CBD oils nowadays. So there's a lot of factors that I apply to it where I say, okay, let's start with a full spectrum CBD first, because what if this does the job? What if this produces a significant improvement, just like it did for my daughter and many, many other kids? And you don't need to really worry about the THC. Or what if you need the THC later on in the future for coming off of meds? Not now. So yes, start with CBD only, and let's go on a trial and error phase first, see what happens. Now, the second part of the questions, do I add on the other cannabinoids or do I stop the CBD? That depends on if we documented any improvements with CBD or not. If CBD didn't do anything, nothing has changed, and it's been 8 weeks, yes, we're going to probably stop the CBD, or we're going to stop that CBD. We might go to a cannabis CBD. We might go to a 1-to-1. There's so many things to do, so many options. And for me, they're very symptom specific. You know, for me, how much THC to recommend to a person, a patient, is based on the severity of specific symptoms that they're dealing with. And based on that, we will play with ratios. So we could do a 18-to-1, we could do a 10-to-1, or a 1-to-1, depending on that unique situation.
Thanks, Ray. That was great. One more question. She says, thank you, learning so much. I see Charlotte's Web was granted the first US patent for a specific hemp strain called CS2. I didn't even know that. Any ideas of what this will be used for? Is that true? They got a patent?
Yeah, so they've been awarded a patent and trademark on something. I really don't know much information about it yet. It's very new, it just happened. I think there's a slide coming up that we talk about Epidiolex and another patent that they've been awarded on CBDA. So these things are going to happen more and more because this industry is becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry in the next decade, let's say, or sooner. So companies have to compete with GW Pharmaceuticals and big corporations. Companies have to do their part to survive, keep their head over the water, so to speak. Charlotte's Web works very hard towards these things. I mean, it's not easy as you would imagine getting these things done and getting patents and becoming as certified and licensed as they are. And I'll talk about that in coming slides too. But it is something that happened recently. I really don't know much information. What it will be used for, I can tell you that there is a division of Charlotte's Web with the Stanley Brothers that is always gonna look for unique phenotypes and coming out with their own unique sort of genetics of products that will be very specific to certain uses. I don't know. We can't say diseases or symptoms, but they are definitely working on creating some unique phenotypes and genetics for near future purposes, and a lot of good things will come out of that, I think. Because on one side you'll have the pharmaceutical products and companies, and then on one side it's going to be depending on companies that can have the capacity to compete and come out with their non-pharmaceutical version of these good full spectrum products. And so Charlotte's Web is not the only one. I'm sure there is going to be many more companies that are going to have something like this.
Okay, great. One more question. They keep on coming. Sorry, Ray.
This is the whole point. I'm happy to.
Okay, so another question. This is from our friend Catherine Louie, so we know her.
Yes.
Do you get the same benefit from the raw form of CBDA and THCA, so the raw forms, as you do CBD and THC? And she's asking, why would you use the raw forms?
Yeah.
For instance,
go
ahead.
I'm going to say these are all slides coming up, and so let me get to the slide and let's talk about them.
Okay, sounds good.
So Catherine, just hang in there with me. I'm going to get to the CBDA slide, the THCA slide, the CBG, the CBN. I have it all prepared for you, so we'll discuss them all. So that means we're going to be here all day, I think. So it's just okay with me. So any other questions, Rhonda, or should I go on?
Go ahead and go on. That was it.
Okay.
And I'm assuming we can get to those slides about the other cannabinoids, and we'll address those when we get there.
Excellent. And if questions come up, just stop me, please. So,
okay.
We're still on CBD, and I want to do a quick recap of CBD because this is so important. This comes up every day in our discussion. When we say CBD, there is differences between one CBD to another, and there's so many products and CBD companies out there. Consumers get lost. They're not educated. They don't really know the differences. But what I'm talking about, or what I'm referring to, is the difference between broad spectrum versus full spectrum versus an isolated CBD. Because when you go to the CBD shop or whatever store it is that you buy your CBD from, all of this is going to be called CBD, but there's such different products. So let's really talk about this real quickly. And it's up to you, the consumer, to either get that information from the manufacturer or the store owner or the label. Hopefully, if these are compliant and responsible companies, they'll give you the information that's required. Full spectrum CBD basically means that it's a whole plant. That means they use the entire plant from head to toe in the manufacturing and extraction process. In definition, that means this product, have it be capsules or topical or oil, offers everything that the plant offers, every cannabinoid, every terpene, and whatever else, chlorophyll and waxes, whatever comes with it. So full spectrum is the whole deal. It's everything that this hemp or cannabis plant packs in, extracted into a product. The somewhat new term or new products in the market are broad spectrum. Broad spectrum basically means same as full spectrum besides the THC, meaning the THC has been pulled out. The THC has been taken out of this product. Now, some of the broad spectrum will have less than 0.1% THC still. So even though if it's a broad spectrum, unless it says THC free on the label, you might get a tiny traces of THC in there. So for, drug testing purposes and stuff like that, just because you're using a broad spectrum, be careful. That doesn't mean that you might not trigger a positive drug test. Or a THC test. The difference between broad and full is just the THC, basically. The THC levels are either less than 0.1 or non-existent. Everything else is in there. All the other cannabinoids are in there. Full spectrum or broad spectrum packs multiple cannabinoids and terpenes in there. So it's not just CBD or THC. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. And then the third option is isolated CBD. Which basically means it's just CBD. There is nothing else in there. There is no other cannabinoids. Most of the isolates don't even have terpenes in there unless terpenes were added back into it. So isolated CBD example would be Epidiolex, for instance. Even though initially they claimed that it's not isolate, we did several testing on their products and there was nothing else in there. It was just CBD. And so isolated CBD is 99.999% CBD oil. And what this leads to is what's referred to in the industry as the entourage effect. The entourage effect, per all the researchers and doctors that are spending time studying the efficacy of these cannabinoids, means that cannabinoids work better when they're taken together versus when they're isolated. When taken together, it creates a synergy, and this synergy enhances the effect of the cannabinoid. That is referred to as the entourage effect. And so when let's go back. When you take that concept and apply it to the three options that you have, that we talked about, full spectrum will give you the full entourage effect because you have all the cannabinoids in there, the main cannabinoids being CBD and THC being present. Broad spectrum will give you somewhat of an entourage effect, except for if the THC is completely taken out, then now you don't have a full entourage effect in there. And isolated CBD will have zero entourage effect. So I leave it up to you to decide which one will be more beneficial versus the other. Obviously full spectrum, in my opinion.
I'd agree with you there. Ray, we have a couple questions. Can I get them in right now?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so one person's asking about speaking of the commercial aspect, do you have any advice for those that would like to extract and medicate with plants that they have cultivated at home?
Definitely. So I've done cultivation and extractions for years. Initially when I started in 2012-13 looking into medicine for my daughter, I couldn't find it, as I told you earlier. So we started cultivating our own strains of CBD and learning how to extract. I was fortunate enough that I had good teachers both here, and the Stanley brothers in Colorado helped me a lot. They tutored me. I've traveled there and learned some of their processes. But in my experience, because we're talking about epilepsy and autism, but more even epilepsy, I can tell you that my observational data of all these kids that I've helped, almost in every case, they've responded much better to an alcohol or ethanol extracted oil versus something that was like, let's say, CO2. And I have my own theories around that and why. There's no facts, we don't know. But when you do an alcohol or ethanol extraction, you get everything that the plant offers. I mean, it comes out to be this dirty oil, right? It's dark, almost black greenish oil, wax. So you get chlorophylls, you get it all. And so if you're gonna do it at home, and I can tell you, it's probably the easiest way to do it too. All you need is some organic, Everclear or uh, you can buy alcohol nowadays online, and you get yourself a stainless steel pan, grind your flowers after you harvest them, and just my suggestion would be to freeze your alcohol literally in a freezer, and soak your grinded flowers into frozen alcohol for a short period of time. Have yourself some micron filters. 225 micron is probably the best. And I would say maybe about 3 to 5 minutes after soaking, even less if you want clear color, or if you don't like that dark color or the smell, 1 to 2 minutes, if not 3 to 5 minutes of soaking, and then strain it, re-soak it again for another 30-40 seconds, strain it again into a separate container, a stainless steel container, and then you have to obviously evaporate. If you're doing this at home, keep in mind this alcohol is 99% alcohol. It's pretty flammable, so it's pretty dangerous. You have to be careful. Just watch some videos of how to do it. But you can get yourself a electric stove oven, double boiler, and slow increase in the heat, and slowly evaporate this alcohol while you're stirring. And you can work it all the way up to about 300, 305 degrees. And that's now decarboxylated. All the alcohol is evaporated at those degrees or heat, and then let it cool down, and you have yourself an extract. This is just a quick recap of it. I mean, we can obviously talk about this at a separate session if you want, but that would be the easiest way. If you want to get crazy about it, you can go and get yourself a rotovap and create a small lab, Breaking Bad. I've done it many years, believe me. So, or you can make it easier for yourself and just take the plants that you cultivated yourself and you trust, and just give it to a reputable lab to extract it for you using alcohol. So there's a lot of options here in California, especially.
Yeah, and in California too, as someone who's done all of that, because I've grown and made my own oils, you can take it to a lab and even get it tested.
Exactly.
So if you grow, a plant and have a pound or so of flour, or even a little bit less, you can make a lot of oil with that, and then you can
Yes.
go and just get it tested, and you saved yourself quite a bit of money. The testing isn't cheap, but I mean, the amount of money you save by not having to purchase oils, I think it's far outweighs. You save a lot of money doing it that way. That's just my personal opinion, but
I agree, but Rhonda, I will say it's easier said than done. I don't think
yeah,
everybody is capable of doing this. These plants are harder than raising a child sometimes. They're very sensitive. You really, really have to be careful, and otherwise, yeah,
yeah.
you'll
No, when I grow, I basically cannot leave my house for more than like a day. Because I don't trust anyone else to water them. I don't trust anyone else to feed them. I have to be there when it flowers. I have to know when it flowers. You just basically have to cancel everything, and I have to just stay
it's
home.
a full-time job. It's definitely a
It
full-time
is.
job. So yeah, I mean, if you like to do that and you have the setting and the capacity, by all means, it's an excellent. Creating medicine for your own child that works is, it's the best. I've done it. It's excellent. So if you can do it and you need help, reach out. We can help you for sure. We don't mind.
And then another question: can you discuss what it means when a label states that it's a hemp oil?
That is the slide we're talking about right now.
Oh, okay,
And I'm going to get into that right now. So let's talk
got it.
about it. Okay. So it's an excellent question. This is something that comes up all the time, every day. And unfortunately, there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much misinformation out there, especially by the professionals in this industry who have businesses. They're so uneducated about this, and they give you the false answer and mislead parents and patients. So what is the difference between a product that says hemp CBD versus a cannabis CBD, or hemp versus CBD? I mean, there's all kinds of different ways of creating a label. Uh, as you see on the slide that we're on right now, generally hemp is very high in CBD. Anything that's called cannabis or marijuana is high in THC. Now let's dive into that a little bit. Well, that's the wrong slide, but here, let me just talk about it here. Sorry. So what this means is the legal limits of what separates a cannabis strain to call it or license it hemp versus cannabis or marijuana is 0.3%. What that means is anything that tests less than 0.3% THC can be licensed and categorized as hemp. Anything that tests higher than 0.3% THC can be licensed and categorized as cannabis and marijuana. Not can be, but has to be. So let's apply that rule to CBD oils in the market. You look at something like Charlotte's Web, it doesn't say CBD on it. It says hemp all over the place. Well, that is a strategic move in their part to become as compliant as they can, because CBD or cannabidiol, or the term CBD, is still a Schedule 1 substance per FDA and the DEA. So if you're international company shipping products all over the place and non-public or not, doesn't matter. But if you want to be compliant, well, at least the least you can do is not to say something that's Schedule 1 on your label. It doesn't mean that it's not in there. It's just trying to be as compliant as you can. There is a lot of CBD in Charlotte's Web, obviously. Now, what if a label of a product says just CBD? It doesn't say hemp or cannabis. The differentiating factor will be how much THC is in there. The easiest way to figure this out is if this is a product that you're not buying in a dispensary, then it's a hemp CBD. If it was a cannabis CBD, or if it had more than 0.3%, then it would have to be sold in a dispensary or a cannabis shop legally. They cannot sell it anywhere else. So if you're buying CBD anywhere else but a dispensary, you're buying a hemp product. Either it says hemp on it or not, doesn't matter. It's a hemp produced CBD product. And I hope that answers the question of the difference between hemp and cannabis. There is really no difference. If I've grown both, if you put both of them next to each other, they're both cannabis. They both bloom and smell just like marijuana, buds and everything, right? The difference is when you take this and test it and you look at the THC percentage. And if the THC percentage is below 0.3%, then you can take your crop or your field or whatever it is and go to the Department of Food and Agriculture and apply for a hemp license. And you now are a hemp farmer. But if your product tests higher than 0.3%, well, you better have a cannabis cultivation license because you're cultivating cannabis. And so that's the difference. The final product, if it's full spectrum, such as Charlotte's Web or Miriam Zope or some of the other brands that we carry, full spectrum is going to have THC in there, but it's going to have less than 0.3% THC in there. And that's the difference.
There's one more question, and actually she raised her hand, so that's
yes.
Kristen, are you there? Oh, she's let's see here.
She's mute, I think.
Unmute. Kristen, are you there? Kristen?
Raising the hand was an accident, sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, no problem. I'll mute you back then. All right, let's keep on going.
Okay, let's keep on going. So don't pay too much attention to if a product is hemp, it's not good. If a product is a hemp CBD, it's not effective. This is all misleading and misconception. It's misinformation. CBD, cannabidiol is cannabidiol. They have the same structure. They're the same molecule. So if you have a product that's hemp but has 5,000 milligrams of CBD in there, you're using a good CBD product. If it's full spectrum, you have entourage effect. You have everything else that's offered. If it's isolated, then you don't have entourage effect, but you still have that molecule of CBD. It could be beneficial to some people. But it doesn't matter if it was a hemp derivative or a cannabis derivative. It's AC/DC versus Charlotte's Web. They both will work very differently from each other because their genetic profiles are different. Their cannabinoid percentages are different. Their terpenes are different. But they're both the same CBD molecule, and they will both bound to your CB1 receptor the same way. So hemp and cannabis, CBD, really the same thing. The THC.
Okay, what about, there's a question, what about hemp, I'm sorry, CBD from hemp seed oil?
Great question. I think there's a slide coming up for that. But so let's talk about it here. So you go to Trader Joe's, you go to Whole Foods, you see that there is hemp oil there too. Just like Charlotte's Web says hemp oil, this says hemp oil too, but this says hemp seed oil. Well, hemp seed oil is a superfood. There is no CBD in there. There is absolutely no cannabinoids in there. It is a very strong source of omega-3 and omega-9. It's an excellent source of very necessary fatty acids that we need. So I would say treat that just like you would treat krill oil or fish oil or some of these other supplements, super supplements. And that's hemp seed oil. There is no cannabinoids, there is no CBD in there.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. So dosing of CBD before we go on to the other cannabinoids. So I have, I'll say, first of all, there is no standards. There is no protocols. There is no standard protocol. We've tried to create some kind of a standard because we have to sort of offer something to the client. We can't just tell them, go home and try whatever dose you want or just take half an ml. Years ago, we came up with a dosing standard, and that was basically a formula to trial and error. And that formula is start at a calculated dose, which we use the patient's weight as a base to calculate. So we said, let's start at 0.5 milligram per pound per day, stay on that for as long as you think it's helping, or as long as you feel like you need to journal and document what happened, if there was any benefits or not. And if you don't see any benefits, then you increase by another 0.5 milligram per pound per day, every week, every 2 weeks. Everybody's case is different. Some people have seizures once every 6 months. So it would be necessary to stay on that first dose for 6 months to see if they're gonna have a seizure again or not, or if the 0.5 milligram per pound per day is perhaps helping that. And if in 6 months they had a seizure, then at that time they would increase by another 0.5 milligram. Some people have a seizure every day or every 2 days or once a week. So that would be enough time for you to try one dose and then move up to the next one if it didn't produce any results. I hope this makes sense. And in sensitive cases where there are multiple other medications on board, I would even cut that smaller. I would go to 0.25 milligram per pound per day, or even less if you think there is a lot of meds on, because there are interactions that could happen, and we'll talk about those interactions in a second. And also keep in mind that everybody's unique and different. That means somebody having the same exact diagnosis or symptom or seizure could respond to 0.5 milligram per pound per day. The next person with the same exact situation could require going up to 4 milligrams or 5 milligrams per pound per day. We don't know why or how, but that's just been the case. So it's important to go through this range of dosing and trial and error until you find, hopefully, what is that unique therapeutic dose for your patient. And so patience is required. I have given you a sample dosing chart that I create for my clients here to look at. I think there could be a couple of these charts uploaded at the Whole Plants Facebook group files that you can look at. We can upload more if necessary, or if you need samples, you can reach out to us. But here is a sample dosing chart for a patient who's 40 pounds. And we are saying that start at 0.5 milligram per pound per day, the first line here, which comes to 20 milligrams a day of the CBD. And then you divide that in 2 doses. So 20 divided by 2 is 10 milligrams per dose. So that's, you'll take 10 milligrams once in the morning and 10 milligrams 8 to 10 hours later in the evening. And that translates to a different volume depending on what product you're using. So how you convert these 10 milligrams into a milliliter so that you'll be able to measure with a syringe or a dosing dispenser depends on the product you're using, depends on the potency of the product. This dosing chart is for the Charlotte's Web original formula. It used to be called advanced oil. And so, because the original formula is 50 milligrams per ml, we took this 10 milligrams per dose and divided into 50, which gave us 0.2 mLs per day, per dose. I mean, well, 2 times a day, I should say, yeah. And so, recap, 40 pounds, 0.5 milligram per pound per day is 20 milligrams. If you're gonna take it twice a day, we divide that into 2, gives us 10 milligrams. We take this number and we divide it into the potency of the product you're using. So if you are using, let's say, Miriam's Hope, that's 100 milligrams a day, then you would divide this by 100. If you're using their 25 milligrams per ml, you would divide this into 25, and it will give you a different dosing as a result. For the Charlotte's Web original formula, because it's 50 milligrams, we divided 10 to 50, we got 0.2 ml twice a day. Now, we would stay at 0.2 ml for as long as we need to see if it's helping or not. So for example, if my daughter is having 1 seizure a week right now, I would stay on this 0.2 ml 1 to 2 weeks to be able to really document if this did anything or any changes in seizures or not. And then if not, then I would go on to the next dose, which is 0.4. You're basically doubling the dose. You're adding 0.2 and reset. Redocument and journal, see if it's helping or not. If not, then you go on. And so this trial and error phase would take you anywhere between 2 to 4 months maybe, and it can go higher than what you see here depending on patient's weight. If somebody is 40 pounds, I can try all the way up to 6 milligrams per pound per day maybe, and they're still not taking a lot of oil. But if somebody is, let's say, 200, 250 pounds, then if you go up to those high doses, you're gonna have to buy a bottle a day at some point. So it's not sustainable. It doesn't make sense. So I hope that makes sense. This is a CBD dosing example. I did say, and I always say in my dosing charts, you have to give a 2 hours distance between CBD oil and other pharmaceutical medications. This is just a standard that we sort of go by. It doesn't mean that there won't be interactions, but at least you're trying as much as you can to prevent it. Yes.
Question, Ray. Someone's asking, can an epileptic patient gain a tolerance to CBD and making it basically making it less effective?
And the answer is 100% yes, in my opinion, based on my experience. I think just like any other supplement or medicine, your body gets used to it. It gets saturated. Your endocannabinoid system gets saturated. In cases of patients that I've helped in California that have been using CBD since 2013, let's say, or 12 or 13, in a good significant amount of these clients, they stop responding. CBD doesn't work. In fact, in some cases, it actually makes things a little bit worse. It exaggerates their symptoms or their anxiety a little bit. I think there is a good amount of research also being done by Dr. Sulak and some other groups about overdosing the endocannabinoid system, or not a deficiency, but what if your endocannabinoid system gets saturated? Saturation of the endocannabinoid system sometimes causes problems. And these are unknown territories, but they've been reported enough that the scientists and the doctors and medical professionals are looking into. I think we'll have a better, clear understanding of what happens if you use too much of cannabinoids. I can tell you based on my experience, the answer is yes. There are many cases where after 5 years or 6 years or whatever amount of time, long time use of CBD, it stops working. And no matter how many different changes or different strains or products they use, it just doesn't work anymore. What we do in these cases, it's what we refer to as resetting of the endocannabinoid system. So we do a reboot, and that reboot basically means you stop, don't use for a period of time, and you restart again from usually either half or even less of where you left off. So let's say your child is taking 50 milligrams of CBD a day and it's not working anymore, then you would stop for a period of time and restart at 25 or 15 or somewhere lower and work it up again and hope that that would work. So basically you're resetting your endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system receptors are not receiving cannabinoids from you anymore for a not long, but a short period of time. And the hope is that once you reintroduce CBD, then they will have the initial effect that they used to have when you first started years ago. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And everybody has their own way of doing this. Some professionals recommend 3 doses to be skipped. Some professionals recommend 3 days. Some recommend 3 months or 1 month to 3 months. I know a doctor here in California who's doing a reboot once a week, meaning he's a neurologist who is very pro CBD. He is telling his patients to stop their CBD every week, once a week for 1 day or 1.5 days and start again. And for him, he's produced results. He claims that has worked in his patients. So again, it's all trial and error.
Another question, and this actually came in as an email from someone before the webinar started, and it's actually a really long email. So I'm going to send this to you, Ray, because it's a pretty long email. But there is one question in here that I would go ahead and ask you. They were asking about the nasal spray that one of your competitors makes, and it's not. I guess it's not working for them, but they wanted to know if you make a nasal spray.
Okay. Great question. So for a long time, we looked into making a nasal spray. I actually even started my own sort of trial. Selected some volunteers. We made a protocol. We selected 5 people to test it on. And then through our own research and advice from the professionals who are working on making these sprays for us, the labs, the doctors, the chemists, we were advised not to. I think the problem is not that it's good or bad. I cannot speak for any other company if their product is good or bad. It's up to you and them to do your research. But what I was told by these chemists and professionals was most of these nasal sprays or the ones that are available in the market for our kids to use, or the CBD nasal sprays or THC or whatever it is, they're made with MCT oil or some kind of a carrier oil that could clog up your sinuses, and that could be an extremely dangerous situation. In comparison to a nasal spray that you buy if you have allergies, for instance, or cough or whatever it is you're using it for, those are all saline or water soluble or water based. They're not MCT oil or any other oil based. So those pharmaceutical grade products are made with carriers that will not affect your sinuses. In fact, they'll clear your sinuses. They won't clog them up. Imagine if you're spraying coconut oil into your sinuses every day. There is some health risks involved, which is the reason why I sort of stepped away from it for now. In my opinion, there's better ways of doing it. I don't think it's there yet. So if you are using it, I know there's videos that are being tossed around social media all the time. Make sure that you research this product and make sure that the company did their due diligence and did their research and they're manufacturing this product properly, not to cause any other risk or harm. And if they did, then sure, I think it could be an immediate delivery system. I haven't seen one that I would give to my daughter yet.
Okay, thank you, Ray. The rest of the email is very dose specific to his child, so I'm going to send that to you.
Perfect.
You can address that later.
Perfect. All right, moving on to CBDA. Basically, it's the raw form of CBD. It's the acidic form. The A stands for acid. So what that means is it works differently. It's going to have a different effect. There is CBDA that you can obtain through tinctures. There is CBDA that you can basically obtain in capsules. There's topicals or transdermal patches. Ultimately, what it sort of relates to is the raw CBD plants. So if you were to take the CBD plant and juice it, you have CBDA. If you were to chew it and swallow it or put it in your salad, you have CBDA. It is not until it's heated up or cooked, which is what we call decarboxylated, that it turns to CBD. So unless it's heated up, if in its raw form, it's CBDA. Now, as I said, it can come in a tincture form. It can come in a capsule form. It doesn't really make a difference. If the question is juicing better than taking a CBDA oil? Honestly, I don't think so. I think it's all the same. Of course, juicing is the most natural way of doing it. Besides the CBDA, you're probably getting a lot of the other acidic options that come with the plant. It offers a lot more than just using a CBDA capsule or an oil. So the juicing would be more beneficial per se, because you're getting more. But if your focus is to take CBDA to see if CBDA doing anything or not, then I think the tinctures or capsules could be the same. What you really have to be careful of is whenever you're looking or using any of these isolated products, CBDA, THCA, CBG, CBN, whatever it is, definitely request to look at a certificate of analysis or what we call test results to make sure that there is no other things in there, no other cannabinoids specifically, that no portion of this has been activated. Meaning, if you buy a CBDA product, but then you look at the test result and on the test result, it says that, let's say 40% of it is CBD, 60% is CBDA, then you're using a CBD-CBDA combo. You're not really using a CBDA by itself. Same thing about THCA. If you're buying a THCA tincture and you look at the test result and a percentage of it has been activated, it's THC, then you're going to have psychoactivity. You're not really using THCA. You're using a combo of the two. So definitely look for test results when you're using these kinds of isolates. If your goal is to use that isolate by itself, or to add this isolate to your existing cocktail of other stuff that you're using, then you want to make sure that it's an isolate. You want to make sure that it's 100% or close CBDA, not anything else. And I hope that makes sense. There's a good amount of research being done on CBDA. I think I mentioned it earlier. I found out, and I say it on the bottom here, that Epidiolex or GW Pharmaceutical has sort of patented a CBDA molecule for uses in epilepsy and also in psychosis, I believe. And they are doing research on this. And their preliminary information that has come out claims that CBDA is great for depression. And it's also claiming that CBDA works very good for epilepsy when it's combined with CBD, not when it's used by itself. So this is very, very early information. I just want you guys to know that there is CBDA pharmaceutical sort of activity going on by Epidiolex. We might see a CBDA pharmaceutical, or we might see an Epidiolex version that has CBDA in there, or other companies. But what they're claiming is CBDA works in conjunction with CBD much better for epilepsy than one of these two separately. So that's something to consider for us. So if your child is not really responding to CBD oils by itself, or it's limited, my next go-to product would be to add a CBDA to it and take both of them together to see if that enhances this therapy or not, or it makes any differences. What we know about it other than epilepsy is, I know that many of the doctors or professionals are recommending CBDA to their patients for uses in anti-nausea for cancer patients who are going through chemo, for instance, and they're nauseous. And so I would say I've recommended CBDA to cancer clients much more than epilepsy. But reading more about what Epidiolex and GW is doing, I'm tempted to try a combination of these two. I know Miriam's Hope currently has a product that's a 1-to-1 CBDA to CBD. So that's something to try, maybe, if you're seeing limited results with your CBD oils. And yes.
So we have a few questions, and they're about CBD. Do you want to address them now, or you want to wait?
Yeah,
when we're...
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, Rhonda, I'm going to leave the timing up to you. Obviously, I have a lot of slides to go through, so.
Okay. Well, I don't mind. Let's see here. When someone's asking, when the CBD was increased, her daughter got really sleepy. Is there anything to do to avoid the fatigue and sleepiness and still increase CBD?
So quick question to this person is, what CBD, how much THC was in there? I can tell you, most of the times when CBD is psychoactive like that, meaning it creates some kind of a psychological effect, it is the other cannabinoids, not really the CBD that's doing it. So most likely the THC percentage is significant in there. If not, if it's an isolated CBD, then this is a sensitive case. I would say it just will be a situation where over time, their child will build tolerance to this, and then they can slowly increase it. But in many cases, this to me says that the other cannabinoids are playing the role.
Would you think for someone like this, maybe going to a broad spectrum where there's no or very little THC?
Yeah, I would absolutely look into a broad spectrum, and a broad spectrum that has maybe no THC in there. And those are available. We have one here. We have one through Miriam's Hope. And see if that helps. And if that doesn't do it, then the third option would be the isolate. And on the isolate, you can go as high as Epidiolex goes. I mean, if you looked at Epidiolex dosing, because there is no THC in there, their dosing goes to probably something like 10 times higher than what we dose with Charlesvab. It's insane, like 500-600 milligrams a day for a child who's like 80 pounds or higher. I mean, my daughter, 93 pounds. By the way, she tried Epidiolex too. Unfortunately, it was terrible for her. But my daughter took 1,000 milligrams a day when she was on Epidiolex, and she's 90 pounds. And it's massive amount of CBD, but it was non-psychoactive because it's just an isolated CBD. So for this person, there are options to explore.
Yeah, they did respond back saying that they used this Charlotte's Web original formula, which does have a little bit of THC in there.
Listen, Charlotte's Web original formula has a significant amount of THC. It's still less than 0.3%, but it's a very potent oil, right? So when you're saying 0.3%, it doesn't mean that, let's talk about this real quickly. Charlotte's Web original formula can be very psychoactive if you took more than what the serving size or dosing suggestions are, which means you can really get high off of this product if you took a lot of it. If the ratio of Charlotte's Web original formula, let's say, is average about 28:1. That means for every 28 parts CBD, there's 1 part THC. So if your doses are going higher on this, you're significantly increasing the THC percentage in there. And so I would definitely say it is the THC that's playing the role in there, and you should try a broad spectrum.
Could it also be, because someone else asked, could it also be that there's it's a side effect from the pharmaceuticals that they're also using? So when you're adding more and more CBD?
Yeah, so that information is extremely important. If this person is experiencing any kind of a psychological effect or psychoactivity, then we have to analyze the pharmaceutical medications and interactions. And so the interactions basically mean, the simplest way to understand interactions is, if the same liver enzyme that's processing your pharmaceutical medication is processing the cannabinoid, then they can interact with each other when they're trying to be metabolized. And so if you're taking this close to each other and there is an interaction, cannabinoids could slow down the metabolism of your medication. In very rare cases, they could even speed it up. And so if by slowing down the metabolism of the medication, that means your medication is going to last longer than it's supposed to in your system. It's going to take longer to process by your liver enzymes. Eventually, you're going to have elevated medication levels, which is typically what happens. And then when you have elevated medication levels of something like Keppra or benzodiazepines, obviously you're going to feel sleepy and drowsy and toxic and lethargic. So absolutely, the answer is yes. First thing is medication interactions. If there is no medications, then it's everything else we talked about. It's the THC probably. Yeah. If you want to know if your medication is interacting with your CBD or not, you can do a search. It usually, nowadays, there's a good amount of information online, but it basically comes down to what liver enzyme is processing your medication. And what we know is P450 liver enzyme. And this is not information that you can call your doctor and ask. I don't think they'll support you in providing this information to you, but you can Google search it and come out with it. I think there's a good amount of information out there. One resource that I would definitely suggest you use is the Realm of Caring Foundations. Or actually, we have that chart at WPA. I think, Rhonda, you have a chart of interactions.
We do.
So go to these files at the WPA site and check the file section, download the interactions file, look at it. And if your medication is on the list, then you can probably sort of be proactive about it. Now, what that means is, tell your doctor you want to check the medication levels once after you start cannabis. Maybe a month or after you start CBD or THC or whatever cannabinoids, tell your doctor to do lab work and check the medication levels. And if they say why, and you tell them why, you tell them you started a cannabinoid therapy and there is a possible interaction, and I want to make sure that it's not. I want to see if the levels are elevated or not. And so that's ultimately the best way to go about it. Find a doctor that's willing to do this for you and work with you and check medication levels if your child is on multiple medications.
Awesome. Another question. Is there a CBD dose or medication that can be used as a replacement to a rescue medication?
Well, I mean, listen, there's a lot of testimonials out there for people who are using, let's say, FECO or RSO of CBD, the pure extract of CBD, while the child is having a seizure, rubbing it under the lips or whatever. In my experience with all these people I've helped, it has produced extremely low results if it was CBD by itself. Rescue dose that has produced results, in my opinion and experience, has been a combination of CBD and THC together, 1-to-1 perhaps. In some cases, parents have used THC by itself as a rescue dose. The understanding is here. How fast is this going to affect your patient or your child to act as a rescue? If you're going to use it sublingually or rub it in the cheeks or under the lips, I don't think it's going to be fast enough. Realistically speaking, by the time, unless your child is experiencing prolonged seizures, if your child is having status, or this is a seizure that's over 10 minutes or so, yes, absolutely, I would definitely suggest trying this. But if your child is having a seizure that's lasting 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I don't think it's enough time for this to hit your bloodstream to act as a rescue if you're doing it sublingually. It would only work maybe if you were to do it as a suppository, or if it was a vape, which is very hard to do when a child is having a seizure. So yeah, it depends on how long the seizure is, in my opinion.
Okay, another question. How quickly would you increase to the dose that worked previously after doing a reboot? Or would you titrate back after each seizure again?
So to me, that depends on how long this person has been using CBD. If they've been using CBD for a long time, then I would give a long break. I would do a reboot of at least probably 3 weeks or more of no cannabinoids. For my daughter, I've done a reboot that was 3 months because she's been on it for 7 years, 8 years. And when we restarted at the beginning of the dose. We went and reset the whole thing and started from 0.5 milligram per pound per day. But we've grown to be patient through this. We know that this is not a magic wand, and it's going to take a lot of trial and error and tweaks to get to where we want and experience the improvements. We also have realistic expectations. Realistic expectations means any kind of an improvement with a natural supplement is accepted, and we're happy about it. So if it's going to improve her seizures by a small percentage, great. If it's going to improve her quality of life, fantastic. If it's going to allow her to stay pharmaceutical free and still have 1 seizure a week, we're okay with that. So every case is different, and so unfortunately, Emily was not one of those kids who went seizure-free after starting CBD. Believe me, I have clients that I've helped who have been seizure-free for years, ever since starting with us, which is excellent. I'm so happy when that happens. But not every case is like that. In some cases, you're just going to have a limited amount of success and improvements, and that's good enough.
And what do you suggest for people who they want to start CBD, THC, but they don't want to, or they're scared to talk to the neurologist because they're afraid of CPS, even though they live in California?
Yeah, so that's the thing. If you're in a state that cannabis is legal, like California, then don't allow your doctors to bully you. Okay, you are in a good state. You can use cannabis legally. The state of California Department of Health Affairs will give your child a cannabis ID card regardless of how old they are. The doctor has no say in this. It's your call as long as you're doing it legally. If you're in other states, then obviously THC or cannabis-based products are not legal. So you shouldn't talk to your doctor about it. You shouldn't tell your doctor about this. Be very careful of Child Protective Services in these cases. This is a controlled Schedule 1 substance. It's the same as any other heavy drug. So, treat this, if you're in an illegal state, just the same as giving your child heroin or whatever else. So be careful. Be wise. Talking to your doctor about it. If it's in California, first go get your doctor's recommendation letters, get your state card if you want to, and then tell your doctor that you are doing this. Don't ask them. Tell them that you have started and you're doing alternative therapy. You're doing a herbal supplement. You're doing CBD or cannabinoids therapies. And you don't ask them for permission, just let them know. Just tell them in a way that, oh, by the way, I just want to make sure that you're aware that we're also doing these alternative treatments. It's just like if you were to take your child to a chiropractor for adjustments and telling your neurologist, hey, Dr. Neurologist, by the way, we're doing chiropractic adjustments on our son. I'm sure they wouldn't have any problem with that. He could have an opinion about it, which is fine, but it's the same with cannabinoid therapies. He can only have an opinion about it. And if you have a good doctor, he'll be very interested to learn about your experience, or he'll have his own experiences to share with you. And if you don't have a good doctor and this doctor says, forget it, I'm not going to see you if you're doing CBD or THC, or call Child Protective Services, change your doctor. Why are you seeing that doctor? Are you out of your mind? So it's as simple as that for me. Easier said than done? Sure. We changed 8 doctors for Emily because of similar reasons. But there are neurologists out there in California that are very supportive, and they have a heart. They feel you. So find them, come into these groups and ask for recommendations. Non-cannabis legal states, I can tell you the same thing applies for CBD. If you're in any non-cannabis legal state and you're able to walk into your local CVS or Sprouts or whatever store you have there that sells CBD legally, then your doctor has absolutely no right to give you a hard time about it. Because if that store is selling it, then you should be able to buy it and use it. Same as you would buy fish oil or vitamins or whatever. And so again, learn how to talk to your doctors about this. Don't be afraid of them. Talk to them about it. Don't ask them. Tell them what you're doing. And that's my best suggestion to you.
And I will say, Ray, the person who asked that question, we've had families deal with CPS. As long as you have your card, as long as you have all your ducks in a row, they honestly will talk to you for about an hour or two, and 95 to 99% of the time, they close the case right then and there.
So Rhonda, let me just, we've had CPS at our house, and I've helped many parents and families who've had CPS called on them here in California even. Here's the situation with CPS. If somebody calls, they have to show up. They can't just ignore that call, okay? So they're gonna show up. What happens when they show up is up to you. What that means is, are you protected? Do you have all your legal documents? Did you get a recommendation letter? Do you have all these cards? Yes, good. What is your living condition like? Because just because the CPS is there because of somebody called and said you're using cannabis, if their agent is sitting at your house and he notices some hazardous situation or some kind of a risk factor, they're going to open a case on you regardless. If the mom and dad are drunk when they show up and the kids are there, they're going to open a case on you. If you don't have medical records, if you can't show them recommendation letters, if you sort of present yourself as an irresponsible parent, they're going to open a case on you. So in my experience, that's usually what happens. If none of that exists, then they don't have a case. The case will close by itself within 30 days.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Keep on going.
All right, THC. I'm going to try to split this up a little bit. Sorry. THC, so it's a 50-50. And what I mean by this is, when we use THC in treatment of epilepsy and seizures, and I mean THC by itself, I'm not saying adding it on top of CBD. In 50% of cases, we've experienced increase in seizures. My daughter is one of those cases. What happens is they start getting more auras, more, sort of things that look like these petit seizures or myoclonic jerks in many of the cases. It's perhaps because there is sensitivities and causes anxiety in these kids. And that anxiety leads on to having more auras or seizures maybe. But in the other 50% of the cases, even by itself, THC has produced better results than CBD in some cases. I wouldn't say 50%. I think the 50% refers to THC in conjunction with CBD. But I know that there is a small percentage of people that use THC by itself for treatment of seizures, and it's worked for them. It's all very unique and individualized again. I think a parent or a patient who's coming into this cannabinoid therapies realm has to be open to trying them all and experiencing with all of them, and creating a journal of what has worked and eventually being able to customize it. I definitely recommend exploring THC if you are coming off of medications. If you're weaning off of medications, your child or your patient is going to experience withdrawals. Withdrawals are tremors. Withdrawals are nausea, anxiety, lack of sleep, and insomnia. These are typical withdrawals from pharmaceutical meds that have been used for long term. THC can address all of this. THC can help with sleep. It can enhance the appetite. It can reduce anxiety in micro doses. And it has obviously the psychoactive effect of THC is the chill, relax effect. And if somebody is going through this withdrawal phase, they're very tense. There's a lot of pain involved, tension involved. It can address all of this. So definitely explore THC if you are coming off of anti-epilepsy medications. The other times where I would definitely say look into THC is when there is a diagnosis of autism and epilepsy together. And I think I have a next slide right here. And so autism and epilepsy go hand in hand. So there's a lot of characteristics that are similar. They fall under the same umbrella, in my opinion. And in many cases, the diagnosis is there. So there are kids who have autism and an epilepsy diagnosis. THC plays a key role in these cases where autism is present. It can definitely address a lot of the issues and symptoms. I think it's almost 100% of time necessary to have THC and CBD together in these cases. Autism, especially the autism that experiences aggressive behaviors or stimming or hyperactivity. A good solid indica THC oil or product can address all of this. And almost immediately. It's not like CBD where you have to go through this chart and try to figure out how many milligrams. THC, proper dosage of THC can probably be found within a week of starting. And again, it will get your patient will get used to it and you'll slowly increase it. But the times where I have a patient with epilepsy and THC comes up, it is very symptom specific. It's the times where this patient is also experiencing autism symptoms, or if they have autism diagnosis. If the patient is just having seizures and they're very calm all the time, they sleep fine all the time, they have no sleep issues, they have no eating issues, then generally I will start them with a CBD, full spectrum CBD by itself. But the reality is many of the epilepsy patients are not like that. Many of the epilepsy patients experience a lot of the autism symptoms as well. And so THC plays a big role. Be open to it. If you're in a legal state, there's good options there in terms of ratios. You have to make sure that it's an indica THC. So THC and cannabis has subcategories. We call them indica, sativa, and hybrid. And indica basically has a calming, relaxing effect. Sativa has a more of a hyper and an energy effect, and hybrid is a mix of the two. A pure indica is pretty hard to find. A lot of people claim to have indica, but they're hybrids. But if you can find a indica dominant product, which is mostly indica, or a pure indica product, in micro doses especially, it can produce some excellent results. And dosing of THC, we'll talk about in a second. Right here in this slide. Dosing of THC, because it's a psychoactive product, has to be microdosed to begin with. Microdose to me means 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram. So how do you give 1 milligram of a THC in a tincture bottle that has, let's say, 1,500 milligrams of THC in there? You have to pick and choose your products right. And it also has to do with how much is your patient or your child used to THC, how much THC have they used before. Keep in mind, when you're using Charlotte's Web kind of a original formula kind of a product, there is THC in there. So your child already has some tolerance to THC. Unless they had used an isolate, they have some THC tolerance in there. So 1 milligram might not be enough in this case. You might have to go up slowly until you find what works for you. And THC also is a product that I would say is an as needed product, not necessarily take it every day clockworks like CBD. Especially if you're doing this for behaviors and cases of stimming and hyperactivity, you can choose to use THC depending on the severity of these symptoms. And, some patients will need it every day, several times a day. Some patients might need it twice a week. So that's very unique per case also. THC does take time to affect. When you're taking a tincture, it's just like taking an edible. Even though you're doing sublingual, most of our kids don't keep it under their tongue for 40 seconds. They swallow it. So make sure when you give the THC oil, wait and give it time to work. And that time to work could be anywhere between 1 to 3 hours. In fact, recent research that I looked at for both CBD and THC, and this research is going to be published very soon, and it will change a lot of things for us, and you guys will see it. I'm not going to refer too much to it because I don't have too much information, but I just saw a little brief summary of it. And this research that was done on how long does it take till the effect of CBD and THC is in your body, and they say it's 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours to peak the effect, and then it drops like a rapid crash. So I know in my experience with THC oils, especially microdoses, it could take 1 to 3 hours till you see the effect. So don't double dose. If you don't see anything happening within 45 minutes, don't give another dose, because then your child will be overdosed, meaning too psychoactive, too high, too sleepy. This is an example of a THC dosing chart that I've created for you guys to look at. I start every single one of my THC clients, regardless of if they're a child or an adult, regardless of how much they weigh, the same way, because it's a psychoactive product. Doesn't matter if you're 10 pounds or if you're 200 pounds, 1 milligram of THC could affect you psychologically. So with that said, I start everybody at 1 milligrams, which is 4 drops. Now, 4 drops of what product? This is a product that's only 300 milligrams per 1 ounce, meaning 10 milligrams per ml. So if you have a 10 milligrams per ml THC oil, then 4 drops of that will equal 1 milligram, which is also 0.1 ml if you're doing a syringe. You will start here one time at nighttime or evening when your patient is home and you're home, and you can observe them, and you'll see if there's any changes in their behaviors and their hyperactivity, in their aggression, appetite, sleep, whatever it is you're giving it for. And if there is no difference, then you can increase to the next dose either the next day, or if you want to try again for 2-3 days and then do it, it's up to you how much you observed. So anytime you feel ready to increase to the next dose, you'll go by another 4 drops and increase to 8 drops, which is equivalent to 2 milligrams. So we're increasing by 1 milligram per dose slowly until we find what that unique therapeutic dose is for your patient. Again, this is a psychoactive product. If you give too much of it, it's going to make them anxious, it's going to make them high and euphoric. In many cases, especially if you're dealing with autism, adding on to the anxiety is not what you want. It's the opposite of what you want. So be very careful with dosages. Eventually, your patient will go up on doses because they'll build tolerance, and they'll, regardless of how much they weigh, you might find that years down the line or a year down the line, you're giving them 20, 30, 40, 50 milligrams of THC sometimes, and they're not high, but it's working for them. So their body will build tolerance to this. But in the beginning, this can be very psychoactive. I wouldn't give it to them in the morning and send them off to school until you know exactly how much they need. So those are my suggestions for the THC product. When you're picking your THC oils, for all the products that you're using, but specifically and especially for THC, make sure that you are requesting a full third-party test result to look at on your own, or bring it to a professional like myself to look at, to interpret what's in there, how many milligrams of other cannabinoids, if it's an indica or not. We can tell if it's an indica or not by terpene profile usually. And so if you don't have a test result or a third-party test result that's testing for cannabinoids, but also for solvents and microbials and pesticides and mold, then I wouldn't use that product. That's your responsibility to look into and make sure that you're choosing products and companies that are responsible and licensed and regulated and so on. Moving on to THCA. THCA is just like CBDA. We said it's the acidic form. It's the raw form of THC. It's been around longer than CBDA, just like THC has been around longer than CBD. THCA is a pretty unique product in the sense that in many cases it has helped with reducing convulsions and seizures. I personally have clients who tried CBD for a long time and just didn't reach the levels of success that they were going for, and then they switched completely to a THCA product, and boom, it sort of like was magic for them. I would definitely suggest exploring THCA if CBD has not touched the seizures at all. You can do it in conjunction or separately. You can do it by itself. It bounds to different receptors differently. It works very differently. So it doesn't really matter if you're using it with a CBD product or not. But experiment with THCA. It's also a product that's used widely for the cancer community. As I said, just like CBDA, it's being used for nausea induced by chemo and radiation, and it's also a pretty strong anti-inflammatory. My take on THCA and the way I sort of explain it to my clients is, if you're interested in taking THC just because you want to create that entourage effect, or if you want to bound to those receptors, but you're afraid of the psychoactivity, then start with THCA. THCA's molecules are very different from CBD or CBDA. You can take the THCA and not worry about the psychoactive aspect of it and see how it works for you. Even for sleep, even for pain, for inflammation, for psychosis. I mean, it could definitely help you where THC can help you, but you don't have to worry about the psychoactivity of it. Just like I said in the beginning, earlier slides, look at test results, make sure it's all THCA. A lot of the THCA oils out there have a significant amount of THC in there. That means a portion of it was activated during the manufacturing process of it. So if you're going for a non-psychoactive product, you have to make sure that it's all THCA. And so look at test results, demand test results from the dispensaries, from the manufacturers. And if they can't give it to you, then don't use that product. That means they don't want to give it to you. Something is wrong there, basically. Otherwise, by law, if they're selling any cannabis product in California, they have to pass final compliance testing. So if they are not giving you a test result, then something is wrong. So that's that. And so going on to the other isolated cannabinoids that we have nowadays, CBN. So CBN, which is cannabinol, is referred to as the sleep cannabinoid. Basically, it's widely used for insomnia or enhancement of sleep. Nowadays, it's mixed with CBD to create a synergy of that entourage effect. Our Canniatric line has a CBD and CBN 1-to-1. So far, we've had great reviews on it for people who've used it for sleep enhancement in their kids. What CBN is, it's a THC product. Basically, it's aged THC. That means when THC sits past its due date of cultivation, it turns into CBD as it ages. Because it's a THC-based product, it can be mildly psychoactive. So even though most CBN products will say non-psychoactive, in fact, there are CBN products that are shipped across the country. Nowadays, you can buy them online. It is a THC product. CBN as a molecule itself is not scheduled by the federal government. So it's not scheduled because they didn't know about it when the scheduling happened. But because the CBN is a byproduct of THC, it creates a gray area in terms of the legalities of it. It is a THC product at the end of the day. So be careful about shipping this product, in my opinion. We chose to sell it as a cannabis product because of that purpose. Again, it can be a little bit psychoactive. So don't think that it's completely non-psychoactive. CBN, through research that's available, has been shown to also be very strong antibacterial, and it promotes bone growth. So it's, again, used by the cancer society and community. Combined with CBD, as I said, it shows to have, benefits of post-seizure activity. So let's talk about my daughter. When Emily has a seizure and the seizure is over after 2 minutes, she goes through a long phase of postictal recovery, meaning she's very zoned out and out of it. She's very anxious. She constantly wants to walk around the house or get out of the house. She can't sit still. She's like a zombie almost. And so CBD and CBN combination, in many of these cases that we've tried, has reduced that postictal period recovery time and made it shorter. And so that's why I'm talking about it here. This is epilepsy talk, so definitely be open to trying that. Just like THC, microdosing. And the reason for microdosing of CBN is because we just don't know how much is needed. It's such an, it's unresearched territory. I would say be patient. Start with 1 milligram, just like the THC. Follow that same THC chart and increase slowly until you find what's working for you. and that's CBN. CBG, the most popular cannabinoid nowadays. CBG is an excellent cannabinoid. I think it's such a great discovery. I think there's so much more coming with CBG, and many companies are looking into how this works and how this can be manufactured to be more effective for specific symptoms. CBG, what we know and what you should know is what we refer to as the parent molecule from what every other cannabinoid is made of. So before CBD becomes CBD or THC becomes THC, it's actually CBG. It's a non-psychoactive component, cannabinoid, and there's a limited amount of research or data available on it. It's pretty new in terms of mass usage, but what we know so far about it, and I know that Whole Plant has done some excellent work in surveying people who use the CBG products that are available, and I put one of their charts here. Honestly, I learned a lot of stuff about CBG through Whole Plant Access's surveys and work that you guys did, so I thank you for that. So I refer to that all the time when I'm helping people. We know that it has produced some results in terms of speech enhancement in autistic clients. I would say it's definitely something to explore and try to see if it will help if your child is doing speech therapy, and if it can enhance that, if it can help in that. It also has helped a very small percentage based on my experience in epilepsy. In fact, in some of the epilepsies I tried CBG on, it made things a little bit worse. So it's a trial and error. I don't think it's the first go-to product for seizures per se. I would definitely say explore it more for speech and for other cognitive gains, and before you explore CBG for seizures, I would try CBD and all the other stuff. The research also says that it's antibacterial and that it promotes bone growth. The recommended dosing for CBG is the same for me. It's the same as CBN. It's on research territory, and we have to do a trial and error. I would take it the same exact protocol. Start very low. When you buy CBG bottles, they say take 1 whole ml or 2 mLs a day. I don't know what they're basing their research on. There is no research on it. Why rush into that? What if your child could respond very well at only 4 drops or 10 drops of CBG? Why do you want to give them 40 drops to start with? Just take your time and do this the proper way and document what works. Start with 4 drops and increase 4 drops every day, or 2 or 4, until you find what's working. That's my suggestion to you. There's a lot more CBG coming. All these major companies are tapping into it, and there'll be some very unique phenotypes of CBG that are going to be worked on and come soon. So we'll talk more about CBG when more options and more research is available. Right now, from what we know, if somebody came to my office and they had autism or spectrum or epilepsy and they were nonverbal or somewhat verbal, I would definitely tell them to try this for those purposes. And now we talk about products. What CBD, what brand, what THC, who's better, who's worse. And there's so many products out there. If you go to a CBD boutique, which they're popping out all over the place here in California, there's probably about over 1,000 different brands, or hundreds of brands on the shelves. And which one is better, which one is worse? I mean, it's so hard to tell. Most of them are good, probably. There's still no regulation, there is no enforcement, there is no licensing, there is no certification for the most part. So what the consumer has to consider is, especially if you're giving this to a sick child or a sick patient or somebody who has already sacrificed the immune system or compromised the immune system, what you have to pay attention to is which company is as licensed and as certified and as regulated as they can be. Because certification and licensing means that they are enforced. They have to be compliant. They have to, follow some set of standards, basically. And so that would be the first thing I would suggest. Don't buy a product that has absolutely no licenses or no company, no location, no nothing. It's not traceable to a facility or a farm or nothing like that. Because the reality is, everybody all of you people who are listening right now can get online and by the end of the day today, purchase a kilo of full spectrum CBD from Oregon or Kentucky or California or somewhere, and it will be shipped to you with UPS. And then you can take that 1 kilo and create 1,000 bottles of CBD and sell it out of your home or garage, online, on an e-commerce page. That's what's happening nowadays. A lot of that is happening. And so you have to be careful who's making this product. Where did they source this oil from? What carrier oil are they using? How sanitized is their environment? Everything counts. So be very careful with that. Look for certification. Look for companies that are certified, good manufacturing practice certified. American Herbal Association also certifies CBD brands. One of the newest ones that certified a handful of companies was Hemp Authority. Hemp Authority certification is extremely hard to get. So if companies have that, then you definitely want to trust that company. And then there's a new organization and association that's launched. It's called this Cannabinoids. CBDIA is what it is. And they're going to do certifications too. So there is some certifications that these companies can get. And so look for them. The other thing you can also ask these companies or manufacturers is, are they vertically integrated or are they outsourced? If they're vertically integrated company and they're US company, meaning it's a US made in one of these states, Colorado, Kentucky, Oregon, then those companies don't outsource anything. That means they have seed to bottle control of everything that you're buying. Most of the time when that happens, then your product is going to be good. If they're growing hemp in the United States, then they're probably licensed by the Department of Food and Agriculture. If they're outsourcing, that outsourcing of that CBD happens primarily from China right now and Asia. And so you're using a product or a brand that buys their CBD bulk from China. Well, as you imagine, just like any other product that you could buy that's from China, it could go both ways. It could be either very good, it could be very bad. The rules and regulations of standards are extremely different over there. So outsourced products, I don't trust them for consistency either. If somebody is not vertically integrated and they're outsourcing, then it's very hard for them to be consistent. Every batch could be different because they're sourcing it from somebody else. Third-party testing is no-brainer. Demand test results from any product, CBD or THC. They have to be easily available to you as a consumer. And if they're not, that's a red flag. Then run away and don't use it. Now, if they are, just because they gave you a COA doesn't make this product a good product. Make sure that you're able to look at the COA and define it and have somebody help you look at it and make sure it's a good product. And then read the ingredients and make sure that there is no solvents or harsh ingredients in the product you're giving your child. And obviously, finally, price. Some people are selling 1,000 milligram CBD for, the same price that you would pay for 6,000 milligram of CBD. So support companies that are trying as much as they can to make this as affordable as possible. And test results. I'm going to show you a COA or a test result of one of our CBD products from Canniatric and try to help you sort of make sense of it. So make sure that it's tested recently, date, make sure that it's a third-party testing lab, address, phone number of the lab, their licensed lab, and then look at what has passed and what has failed. So for example, in this case, we tested for everything, meaning cannabinoid, pesticide, microbials, mold, fungus. We even tested for terpenes in these cases, and everything passed. And green passes here. That is very important, because if it came positive for any kind of a residual solvent, you want to look at that, because even if it says a small percentage, if your child is going to take a high volume of this product, then that could be a significant amount of that residual solvent. So I'll give you an example of this. Epidiolex obviously is an FDA approved product. That means they've passed all of these phases. But Epidiolex has a significant amount of alcohol in there as a preservative. And I think they put it in there so that there is no plant separation. By percentage, almost 10% of each bottle of Epidiolex is alcohol. So by guidelines, it's okay because it passes the parts per million requirements that are set by FDA. But here's where it becomes a problem. If my child is supposed to take 10 mLs of this product every day, then that volume becomes significant. It's an extremely high percentage in this case. And that could cause problems where this child's CBD oil, because of the alcohol, would potentially interact with their medications or cause other problems, right? So you're giving your child 10% alcohol in a 10 mLs a day, that's a significant amount. So look at these results, make sure what solvents are there, what percentages are there. You know, sometimes it's okay if it has a tiny percentage of something, but it passed because solvents are used to extract cannabis oils. You know, some cannabis oil is using alcohol, some uses CO2, some use butane and hexane. All of those are allowed by licenses in certain cities. And if it triggers a small percentage, it doesn't mean it's a bad product as long as you know that based on the dosing and serving size, it's still safe. And then you look at the cannabinoids. So cannabinoids, for example, this is a small one. Oops, sorry. It's very hard to see in my screen. So if you guys can take a picture of it and shoot it up. Basically, if you take the THC and you scroll down to where it says milligram per ml in this middle slide here, the test result in the center. So it says milligram per ml and milligram per gram, I should say, milligram per gram. And if you take the THC of that and you divide that with the CBD, you'll get the ratio of your oil. Basically, if you take CBD milligram per gram and divide it by the THC milligram per gram, that'll give you the ratio of this product, meaning how many milligram, is it a 28 to 1, 25 to 1, 21 to 1, or so on. And then it also has to tell you the levels of other cannabinoids. So CBDA, CBG, CBN, THCA, the THCV, they're all listed here. And a full spectrum product, and how do you know if something is a full spectrum or not? We'll have traces of some of these other cannabinoids in here. If it only has CBD in there, and if you were looking at this test results and the CBD was, let's say, 100 milligram per gram, and none of the other ones existed, meaning everything else was 0, then that means you're using an isolated product. If it has all the cannabinoids and the THC says 0, then you're using a broad spectrum product, and that's how you tell the difference, basically. I hope this makes sense to you guys. And that's my presentation, folks.
Thank you, Ray. We have a few more questions if you have some time. I know we've kind of run over.
It's okay, go ahead.
Okay. And I actually do have to leave in about 15 minutes. So, but I think we can ask some of these questions.
Yeah, I do too. Go ahead.
Okay. So, so one person is asking about, they have a child with seizures who they happen in their sleep. They use CBD, THC right before bed, usually once a day, unless he has more seizures, and they use twice a day. They're asking, should they try and split up the dose just in general to twice a day?
So they're primarily using it for sleep, is what you said, right?
Yeah, seizures in his sleep.
Okay. So based on the research that is recently coming, it seems like especially sublingual dosing takes much longer to peak and affect than what we thought. I would say give it at nighttime only, but give it earlier. Don't wait till bedtime. And focus on that one dosage, but you know, instead of giving it like half an hour before bedtime or so, give it maybe 3 hours or 4 hours before bedtime.
Okay.
And I would start with that. And if that doesn't do it, then I don't think twice a day is really the key. I think it's just trying other cannabinoids and ratios and higher doses, probably. Now, one other thing that I've done in the past, because when we are taking Emily off of all these meds, one of the most common withdrawals for her was insomnia. She couldn't sleep. We would give her a dose in the middle of the night. I know it's, it's a nightmare. It's easier said than done, right? But we would wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and give her a second dose while she is sleeping.
Wow. That helped her, huh?
It helped her.
Oh, that's amazing. So someone was asking that you had said giving 100% of the time, you suggest giving THC for a child with epilepsy and autism, and they wanted to just make sure that's what you said. I think I
Yes,
heard you say that.
yes. Anytime autism is in the mix, THC is a must. It has to be there. It plays such a big role in these treatments. And we can be very specific about each symptom and how much THC is needed or how many times a day. And as I said, maybe even how many times a week, maybe once a week, maybe twice a day. But it plays a big role. I think that immediate effect of THC is necessary if you're dealing with autism. CBD doesn't have an immediate effect. CBD builds up, long-term treatment therapy.
Okay, I agree. Um, and then someone's asking, would you give CBN after a seizure? Because you mentioned the after the seizure it helped.
What I found helpful is a combination of CBN and CBD after a seizure. And you can try CBN by itself. I've just haven't had a lot of experience to tell you if it's going to work the same way or not. I know that it's a sleep enhancing agent, so when you combine it with CBD, then the psychoactivity goes away a little bit. So it's not necessarily going to put them to sleep, maybe. But the point of it is, if your child or your patient is experiencing long periods of postictal periods, then it's worth trying a CBD and CBN combo.
Okay, and that's interesting. I've actually never heard of that, but CBN is an interesting cannabinoid. It's got a lot of potential, I think.
I think so.
They're asking that she doses 4 times a day. Should I try changing to a larger dose twice a day?
Depends on the unique situation. How many times a day is that patient having seizures? If that patient is having seizures multiple times a day, then yes, stay at 3 or 4 times a day. If that patient is not having daily seizures, then twice a day for sure. You don't need to give it more than that.
Okay, and then we had someone ask about, this was in reference to the talk we had about CPS.
Yes.
They were asking about an adult child who receives SSI,
yes.
Or Division of Disability Personal Care Hours, which are federally funded. Would that, in your experience, have you had any families have an issue with that in cannabis?
Never. No, I have never had an issue. At the same time, you can look at this, just forget about your child. Any adult in California who's going into a dispensary and buying recreational cannabis is violating federal law. Are they being sent to jail or prosecuted? No. You're in a state that's cannabis legal as an adult, regardless of, I know the program you're referring to. If you are a medical patient, regardless of how old you are, I would go and get a medical recommendation letter. I would also get the state card, and then I think you should be protected. If this becomes a case, which I hope it doesn't, if it was me, I would take it to court and sue them.
Okay. I think that's it for all of the questions. There may have been a few in the group, but you're in our group.
Yes.
So if you see any questions in there, please feel free to address them or talk to the person directly.
Absolutely.
You guys, if you're in the Whole Plant for Access support group, Ray is in our group. He answers a lot of our questions. We often tag him on things, especially if the person's in California and they're looking for THC oil. Or other things. We may have questions about CBD and maybe CW hemp. We often tag Ray. He's also donated to WPA4A in the past with products that we've given out to families. So he's a great friend of ours, and he's in our support group. So you can find him in there. You can tag him and ask him questions and get a hold of him if you need to get a hold of him. And Ray, thank you so much for this presentation. This was amazing. You put a lot of work into this, and there was a lot of great information.
Excellent.
For people that are just starting, I think it's amazing that you went through all the different cannabinoids and, just some tips on how to find different products and look at lab reports and all that kind of stuff. So, people are chiming in saying thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys also for creating this platform. I'm happy to share my experience. If anybody has questions and you're posting them in the Facebook group, please tag me so that I can see it because yeah, we're
busy. No, I feel you. Someone asked about the Facebook group. It's Whole Plant Access for Autism Support Group. You can find us on Facebook. Ray also has a couple different Facebook groups. If you find Ray on Facebook, you can. He has a couple different groups that he also admins and runs. So either way, you can find Ray. He's all over Facebook. He's a busy, busy guy, but he does take time to answer your questions. When I
Anytime.
first started out, I had a ton of questions, and he was amazing, and he helped me learn so much. So I'm always thankful to Ray and what he did for me when I first started my journey, because I was clueless, just like everyone else who starts this journey. You don't know until you know. So thank you again, Ray. Thank you,
No,
everybody. We have to
thank
get
you, everyone.
going. I appreciate everybody attending, and everybody, you guys have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.